In this shocking near-death experience, former gay man Zachary Blackwood discovers the terrifying truth about the afterlife that made him completely transform his life. What he witnessed will leave you speechless. I'm Zachary Blackwood, 47 years old, living in Burlington, Vermont. Before I tell you about my near-death experience, you need to know who I was. I lived in a cozy two-story house near Lake Champlain, working as a graphic designer for a local advertising agency. I was openly gay and had been in a relationship with Marcus for 3 years. That morning started like any other. I was heading to work in my Subaru Outback, sipping my usual caramel macchiato. The fall colors were stunning, and the crisp morning air felt refreshing. I had just finished a phone call with Marcus about our weekend plans when it happened. A massive moose appeared out of nowhere on Route 7. In Vermont, moose accidents aren't uncommon, but nothing prepares you for a 1,500-pound animal suddenly standing in your path. I swerved hard to avoid it, but at 65 miles per hour, my car spun out of control. The last thing I remember was my coffee cup flying through the air as my car rolled down the steep embankment. The crash was brutal. My car hit several trees before coming to rest at the bottom of the ravine. The impact crushed the driver's side, and I was pinned between the steering wheel and the seat. Later, I learned that a passing truck driver saw my car's taillights through the trees and called 911. The rescue was complicated. The steep terrain made it difficult for emergency services to reach me. It took them over an hour to cut me out of the wreckage. By then, I had lost a lot of blood from multiple injuries: 4 broken ribs, a punctured lung, internal bleeding, and severe head trauma. I remember fragments of the rescue: the sound of metal being cut, voices shouting instructions, the whirring of helicopter blades. They airlifted me to the University of Vermont Medical Center in Burlington. The doctors later told me that I died twice in the helicopter, once for 3 minutes and again for 4 minutes. Marcus was at work when he got the call. He rushed to the hospital, but by then, I was already in emergency surgery. The doctors gave me a 20% chance of survival. Multiple surgeries were needed to stop the internal bleeding and repair the damage to my organs. What happened during those minutes when my heart stopped changed everything. The experience was so vivid, so real, that it completely transformed my understanding of life, death, and everything I thought I knew about existence. It wasn't like the peaceful, loving experiences you often hear about in near-death stories. What I saw and felt was something entirely different, something that would haunt me forever. Before this happened, I was comfortable with who I was. I had a good life, a loving partner, and a successful career. I never questioned my lifestyle or beliefs. I was raised Catholic, but hadn't been to church since high school. Religion wasn't part of my life, and I didn't think it needed to be. I believed that if there was a God, he would accept me as I was. But those minutes when I was clinically dead showed me how wrong I had been. The experience shook me to my core and forced me to confront truths I had been avoiding my entire life. What I saw in those moments between life and death would change not just my beliefs, but my entire way of living. The moment my heart stopped, everything changed. It wasn't like falling asleep or passing out. It was instant and crystal clear. I felt myself separate from my body, floating above the helicopter. I could see the paramedics working frantically on my lifeless form below, but I felt strangely detached from it all, like watching a movie about someone else. Then came the tunnel. Not the peaceful, warm light that people often describe, but a swirling vortex that pulled me in with incredible force. The sensation was terrifying, like being sucked through a vacuum at impossible speeds. Colors I'd never seen before swirled around me, and there was a deep, resonating hum that seemed to vibrate through my very being. As I moved through this tunnel, I began to feel an overwhelming sense of my life's actions being laid bare. It wasn't just memories playing back. It was like experiencing every moment simultaneously. But this time I felt the full weight and consequence of each action. Every lie I'd told, every person I'd hurt, every selfish decision, they all carried a physical weight that pressed against me. The most crushing revelations were about my relationships. I saw Marcus, but not in the loving light I was used to. Instead, I saw how our relationship, which I had always defended as love, was actually causing spiritual harm to both of us. Each intimate moment we shared appeared as dark spots on our souls, like ink drops in clear water. I saw my childhood, when I first started feeling different from other boys. I remembered the confusion, the fear, and eventually the defiance against traditional values. But now, from this new perspective, I could see how each step away from my early religious upbringing had led me further from truth. The tunnel experience felt like it lasted for hours, though it was probably just seconds in real time. Then suddenly, everything stopped. I found myself in a vast space that defied description. It wasn't dark or light, it just was. And I wasn't alone. A presence approached me. It wasn't a physical form, but I knew immediately who it was: Jesus Christ himself. The recognition came with absolute certainty, like suddenly remembering something you've always known but somehow forgot. His presence was overwhelming, pure love mixed with an authority that made me want to fall to my knees. But this wasn't the gentle Jesus from Sunday school pictures. This was the King of Kings, the judge of all creation. In his presence, every justification I'd ever made for my lifestyle crumbled to dust. I couldn't hide anything. Not from him, not from myself. He didn't speak with words, but his message flowed directly into my consciousness. I understood that he loved me with an intensity that was almost painful, but that love didn't mean acceptance of all my choices. I saw how my lifestyle, which I had convinced myself was natural and good, was actually in direct opposition to his design. The message was clear. My sexual orientation itself wasn't the sin. It was the choice to act on it, to embrace it, to make it my identity. I saw how this choice had affected not just me, but others around me. Every time I'd encouraged someone else to be true to themselves by embracing homosexuality, I'd actually been leading them away from salvation. Then came the most difficult part. Jesus showed me others, countless souls who had made the same choices I had. I saw them in what I can only describe as a holding place. Not quite hell, but definitely not heaven. They were trapped in their own justifications, unable to move forward because they refused to acknowledge the truth about their choices. What struck me most was that many of these souls had been religious, even Christians, but they had chosen to interpret Scripture in ways that justified their lifestyle rather than conform to God's actual design. I saw how this deliberate misinterpretation had created a barrier between them and true salvation. The presence of Jesus then guided me to witness something that still makes me shudder. I saw glimpses of hell, not the cartoonish version with red devils and pitchforks, but something far more terrifying. It was a place of complete separation from God's love, where souls experienced the full consequence of their choices. I understood then that hell wasn't a punishment God created out of anger, but rather the natural result of choosing to live permanently separated from him. The souls there had made their choice during their earthly lives, and now that choice was eternalized. What happened next was even more intense. Jesus began showing me the truth about sexuality and gender as he designed it. I saw how the male and female union was more than just physical. It was a spiritual reality that reflected deeper truths about God's relationship with humanity. I was shown how modern culture's embrace of alternative lifestyles wasn't progress, but rather a sophisticated form of deception. Each step away from traditional marriage and gender roles was actually a step away from divine truth. The revelation continued as I was shown the spiritual impact of pride parades, gender transition surgeries, and same-sex marriages. From this heavenly perspective, I could see the spiritual darkness that surrounded these events, despite their outward appearance of joy and celebration. But what hurt most was seeing how my own activism had affected others. Every time I had spoken out in favor of LGBTQ+ rights, I had been unknowingly leading others away from salvation. The weight of this responsibility was crushing. Jesus showed me specific moments, conversations I'd had, social media posts I'd made, young people I'd influenced. Each instance was like a stone around my neck, and I felt the full weight of my role in leading others astray. Yet through all this, I felt no condemnation from Jesus, only an overwhelming love and desire for me to understand the truth. He showed me how many of my gay friends were actually struggling with their choices, despite their outward appearance of happiness and pride. Then came a series of visions about my future, two possible paths. In one, I continued my current lifestyle, eventually dying without changing and facing the eternal consequences. In the other, I embraced the truth, left my gay lifestyle, and helped others do the same. The contrast between these two futures was stark and undeniable. I was shown that my same-sex attractions weren't my fault. They were the result of various influences and experiences in my life. But how I chose to act on them was my responsibility. Jesus revealed that he offered the strength to resist these desires, even if they didn't completely go away in this lifetime. The most powerful moment came when I was shown people who had successfully left the gay lifestyle. Their struggles were immense, but their joy in following truth was even greater. I saw their crowns of victory in heaven, earned through their difficult but faithful choices on earth. This part of the experience ended with a profound understanding. True love isn't about affirming everyone's choices, but about helping people find their way to God's truth, even when that truth is difficult or unpopular. At this point in my experience, everything shifted. I found myself in what I can only describe as a heavenly courtroom, but instead of being put on trial, I was being given a choice. I could return to earth with this new understanding, or I could face judgment right then. The weight of this decision was enormous. I knew that if I chose to return, I would have to completely change my life. I would lose friends, face criticism, and have to leave Marcus, whom I truly cared about. But I also knew that staying would mean facing judgment for my unrepented sins. Jesus showed me that my return would serve a greater purpose. My experience could help others trapped in the same lifestyle I had been living. He revealed how many people were secretly questioning their gay lifestyle but felt too afraid or confused to change. I was given a glimpse of the support system that would be available to me if I chose to return. Genuine Christians who would help me transition out of my gay lifestyle, counselors who understood the spiritual aspects of sexuality, and even some unexpected allies. The most moving part was seeing how my testimony could potentially save others. I was shown specific people, some I knew, others I hadn't met yet, who would be impacted by my story. Their eternal destinies could change because of my willingness to speak the truth. Before making my decision, I was given one final vision. I saw myself speaking to large groups, sharing my testimony, and helping others find freedom from the gay lifestyle. I saw tears of joy as people found healing and restoration through accepting God's design for sexuality. But I was also shown the cost. I saw myself being called a bigot, a traitor to the LGBTQ+ community, and worse. I saw former friends turning their backs on me, social media attacks, and even threats to my safety. Yet alongside these challenges, I saw the peace that comes from living in truth. The choice became clear. With a mixture of fear and determination, I chose to return. The moment I made this decision, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and purpose, despite knowing the difficulties that lay ahead. Just before returning to my body, I received one final message. My mission wasn't to condemn, but to love, to help others find the same truth I had discovered, always with compassion and understanding, remembering that I too had once been blind to these truths. Waking up in the hospital was like being born again. The physical pain was intense, but it paled in comparison to the spiritual awakening I had experienced. Marcus was by my bedside, holding my hand, but I knew things would never be the same between us. The first few weeks were the hardest. Explaining my experience to Marcus broke both our hearts. He thought the head trauma had affected my mind, that I would come to my senses once I recovered. But I knew what I had seen was real. I found a supportive church and began the difficult journey of transformation. Some days were harder than others. The same-sex attractions didn't magically disappear, but I now had the strength and understanding to resist them. My story spread quickly through social media. As expected, I faced intense backlash from the LGBTQ+ community. Former friends accused me of internalized homophobia, of betraying the cause. But for every person who rejected me, another reached out privately, expressing their own doubts about the gay lifestyle. Today, 2 years later, I run a support group for people questioning their sexual identity or seeking to leave the LGBTQ+ lifestyle. It's not about conversion therapy or forcing change. It's about sharing truth with love and supporting those who choose to follow God's design. The accident that nearly killed me actually saved my life, and not just mine. Every week, I receive messages from people who found hope and healing through my testimony. Some choose to leave the gay lifestyle, others are still wrestling with their decisions, but all of them know they're loved by God. My near-death experience showed me that true love sometimes means speaking difficult truths. The eternal consequences are too serious to remain silent. Yes, I lost my old life, but I gained something far more precious, the peace of living in truth. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell to stay updated with more incredible testimonies that could change your life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today.